So I want you to just, for a moment, imagine stepping off a ship into 16th century Istanbul. We're talking the absolute jewel of the Ottoman Empire under Suleiman the Magnificent.
Right, and it's a vast, dense, crowded city. And if you're thinking about survival, well, the first thing that comes to mind is water.
Yeah.
Clean water.
Exactly. And your first assumption, based on, everything we know about European history from that era, is that water access was probably difficult, restricted, maybe even dangerous.
At best. But here's where the story just completely flips on its head. In that very city, historians have found that the Ottomans built a public water system so comprehensive that, well, many parts of Istanbul had more free, readily available water than a lot of modern cities do today.
And that's the core contradiction we're diving into. Our mission today is to really explore how the Ottomans managed to turn water, a basic necessity, into a universal public right, not just a commodity you had to buy.
We're going to unpack the philosophy, the engineering, and the institutional genius that really made it all possible.
Because the contrast is it's a shock. While cities like London or Paris were, rationing water from polluted wells or charging fees for it.
Or restricting the clean sources entirely to the wealthy.
Right. Meanwhile, in Istanbul, water flowed freely, literally at every major street corner, from these incredible carved marble spouts. No fee, no questions asked.
So this wasn't just a technical achievement, it was a deeply moral one. And it started not with a blueprint for an aqueduct, but with a philosophical foundation.
Okay, let's unpack that. Where does this idea even come from?
The entire commitment to public water is rooted in their theological belief. In the Islamic worldview, water is. It's so much more than just a utility. It's seen as a trust from Allah.
A trust.
Yes, the Quran states it very clearly. And we made from water every living thing. So that means stewardship of water becomes a sacred duty.
So right away, providing water isn't just a civic planning problem. It's a spiritual obligation, an order from the top, you could say.
Precisely. And that spiritual weight was then reinforced by the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. He taught that the highest form of charity, the absolute best good deed you can do, is giving water to drink.
Wow. So denying water is...
It's akin to denying life itself. And that level of spiritual commitment really dictated how the entire system was designed, how it was funded, everything.
Which brings us to the visual heart of this system, the sebil. These ornate public fountains, you can still see them all over Istanbul. They're beautiful, but they were more than just architecture, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. They were functioning spiritual and civic machines. Even the word sebil is incredibly significant. It means path or cause.
A path to what?
In this context, it meant a pathway to spiritual reward in the hereafter. So every time a ruler or a wealthy citizen paid for a fountain, they saw it as opening a path for others to quench their thirst, but also, opening a path for themselves to heaven.
And this gets into that fascinating concept of sadaqah jariyah, ongoing charity. That seems to be the key to understanding why so many people, not just rulers, built these.
It's vital. This concept essentially views funding a fountain as a form of, immortality, continuous merit. Think about it. A sultan might build a huge monumental sebil next to the Hagia Sophia.
Sure.
But then just down the street, an ordinary merchant, or maybe even a widow with modest means, might fund a smaller, simpler fountain for her neighborhood.
Yeah.
And long after they died, every single time a stranger took a sip,
A prayer was said for them.
a silent prayer. It ensured continuous merit flowed back to them. It tied their eternal legacy to a flow of mercy that ideally would never, ever dry up.
That is such a powerful incentive for generosity. But the question is always sustainability, right?
Yeah.
How do you make that piety, that generosity, actually last through decades, centuries, political changes?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Because charity can be fleeting, and empires rise and fall.
Exactly.
And this is where the Ottomans moved from philosophy to, I think, pure institutional genius.
Yeah.
The economic backbone of this whole thing was the waqf system, the endowment.
The waqf system. Okay, explain this for us, because this feels like the real technical legal magic behind the whole operation.
It is. A waqf is basically a legally unassailable charitable trust. When a patron built a fountain or a school or a hospital, they didn't just pay for the construction.
Okay.
They also dedicated income-generating assets, usually land or apartment buildings or some shops, specifically to maintain that facility forever.
Yeah.
The income from those assets was legally locked in.
So wait, it wasn't just a one-off donation. The WAF made sure that if a pipe broke 20 years later, the money was already there, guaranteed from its own revenue stream.
Exactly. And the most brilliant part, which gets to your point about stability, is the legal permanence. Once an asset was put into a whack, it could not be sold, it could not be inherited, and crucially, it couldn't be seized by the state or diverted by the next ruler.
That's amazing. So it was protected from political whims?
It was. They had specialized administrators, mutawalas, whose only job was managing these endowments. The structure was specifically designed to withstand political shifts and ensure that the water kept flowing. Basically, as long as Istanbul stood. This was planned, perpetual maintenance.
I have to ask, though, wasn't there a temptation? Even with those legal safeguards, did a sultan never try to, divert those funds for a military campaign or a new palace?
Oh, the temptation was always there. And, historically, some endowments did weaken over time, especially during a crisis. But the system was fiercely guarded by both the religious authorities and the public. Messing with the water endowments was seen as, well, both incompetence and sacrilege.
A political third rail.
A moral line you crossed at your own peril. The social contract was clear. Visible, flowing public water signaled a just and stable regime.
Which really cemented this idea of the great equalizer in the city. And that's the striking societal value here, I think.
Absolutely. The sources paint this incredible picture of the same cool, clean water that was drawn for the Sultan's private mosque, also flowing freely for the baker on the street, for the merchant, for the slave. No gatekeeper, no tax collector.
Your status just didn't matter at the spout. The idea that infrastructure itself could be designed around equality, it's just a profound contrast to what was happening elsewhere at the time.
It provided universal dignity.
So let's shift gears a little. We've
Yeah.
talked about the why, the philosophy, the economics. Let's talk about the how. Because this free-flowing water wasn't magic. It was the result of incredible and often unseen engineering.
Right. This is where we move from the marble facade to the hidden network underneath. The lifeline for the city wasn't just local wells. The main source of water came from the Belgrade forest.
And that's, what, dozens of kilometers north of the city?
Dozens of kilometers. Getting that water to a thirsty, dense metropolis was a monumental task. They were building on and really refining old Roman and Byzantine systems.
So we're talking aqueducts.
We are talking massive aqueducts. The pinnacle of this was the Kırkçeşme water network, which was finalized under Suleiman. It included structures like the Moldova aqueduct, just this magnificent two-tiered bridge of arches spanning a huge valley.
And these stone channels carried water for how far?
Over 50 kilometers.
Yes.
And they delivered an estimated, well, something like 18 million liters of water per day into the city's main distribution points.
18 million liters. That scale is just breathtaking. But maintaining something that complex, that huge, it couldn't have been simple.
Not at all. It required a whole class of specialized, dedicated workers. They were called the Su Yolkileri,
Which means?
water pathkeepers. And their job was entirely invisible, but absolutely vital. They were highly skilled engineers who constantly walked the routes, checking pressure, repairing tiny cracks in the underground channels, making sure there were no blockages.
So their invisible labor basically kept the entire city alive.
It did. And the system wasn't just about flow, it was also about resilience. It incorporated these massive underground cisterns, like the famous Basilica cistern, to store water for droughts or, military sieges.
So it was designed for survival.
Absolutely. And the flow itself was carefully managed with sophisticated gravity feeds and pressure systems to make sure everyone got their fair share. Mosques, palaces, hospitals, public fountains all received a regulated amount. It was a perfect balance of technology and mandated charity.
It occurs to me the fountains themselves were almost like silent teachers of science.
They really were.
Yeah.
They quietly showcased a mastery of hydraulics. Muslim engineers had perfected the use of siphons and gravity-fed systems. They were building on the work of people like the 12th century polymath al-Lazari.
The one who documented all the automated mechanical fountains.
That's the one. He was essentially turning water flow into moving public art using gears and water wheels. And let's not forget the ecological wisdom here, too. The use of qanats, these deep underground channels that minimize evaporation, was essential for preserving water in the hot summers.
So the flow of knowledge followed the flow of water.
It really did. When European engineers later studied the Ottoman system, they recognized its superiority in public distribution and borrowed heavily from those principles. So infrastructure itself became this major intellectual export.
Okay, so if we connect all this, the infrastructure, the philosophy, the economics, we start to see the social impact. These sebils weren't just water coolers. They were profound symbols.
They were. They served three interconnected roles. First, And maybe most obviously, they were political. Commissioning a grand, continuously flowing fountain was the ultimate statement of a ruler's legitimacy,
It projected stability, order, prosperity.
and that they were fulfilling their religious duty to provide life-sustaining water. Conversely, the political risk was huge. If the fountains ran dry,
It meant the ruler was failing, not just practically, but morally. It signaled decline.
exactly. The fountains were the pulse of the city's confidence in its leadership. Second, they were vital civic hubs. Like a Roman bath or a European town square, the sebils was the pause button for the urban day,
The gathering spot.
the gathering spot. Travelers would refill their water skins, merchants would pause their deals, neighbors would catch up, gossip was exchanged, news spread. They were these centers of daily social interaction,
A shared ritual where people from every class stood side by side.
which feeds right into the third point, community identity. The shared act of drinking free, clean water reinforced this collective idea the city was organized around shared mercy, not segmented by wealth. Every sip was a tangible expression of that moral commitment.
So let's bring this back to you, the listener, today. You can still go to Istanbul and see these beautifully restored sebils. What story should they be whispering to us now, centuries later?
I think they whisper a really crucial story about prioritizing dignity over profit. In so many modern cities, water access is becoming more and more unequal. It's driven by bottled water markets, complex municipal fees, or outright privatization of utilities.
And Ottoman Istanbul offers this powerful historical alternative.
It does. It shows us infrastructure that was explicitly designed around generosity and guaranteed equality. It changes the entire definition of an infrastructure investment. It's not a cost center. It's a moral institution.
Moral institution. I like that.
The core lesson is that city planning and public works are, at the end of the day, extensions of our civic values: accountability, foresight, and empathy. The sebils remind us that when governments prioritize accessibility and perpetual sustainability, they're doing more than just engineering. They are shaping a culture.
They're ensuring the foundational needs of every citizen are met. I think the Ottoman fountains really prove that civilization is measured not just by its grandest monuments, but by the tangible care it shows for the everyday essential needs of its people. Mercy and utility were never separate things.
And that's the full journey. We've gone from the sacred texts that inspired the system, through the legal genius of the WAC, to the incredible engineering of the Kruk-Chesmi aqueducts. And the result was a metropolis where devotion and dignity flowed freely for everyone.
A truly remarkable model for urban existence.
And maybe the final enduring lesson from those beautiful structures is this: the legacy of Ottoman Istanbul remind us that when you view the most essential resources, like mercy, knowledge, and life-sustaining water, as sacred gifts, then they must be allowed to flow freely. Not hoarded, not taxed, not restricted.